Elections have consequences and impact, specifically on real estate. Today, we're going to talk about this election and how it's going to impact real estate moving forward. Stay tuned to this episode of The Den.
The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. And today we're going to be talking about elections and the impact it's going to have on the real estate industry. Now, we all know that this election has come and gone, but there will be lasting impacts. But before I get to that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul Hammy, the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Groen, and the boss, Shannon Martinez. My name is Ben. Don't elect me for anything, Lyons. Let's keep that. You know, it was funny because after a state level meeting one time, I was really upset about some of the policies that were being passed. And I called my wife on the way home and I said, and this and that, and I'm running for Congress. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, no, I'm not, but I'm really upset right now. So being a politician is not for the faint of heart by any stretch. And this was a contentious election. But we want to talk about today how it's going to impact real estate moving forward. I mean, it's fresh enough. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be a few weeks after the election. But we want to talk about the impact it's going to have maybe for the next 4 years, and what we can anticipate here locally, but also on the national level. So let's talk a little bit about that. Paul, I'm going to jump right to you since you were staring at me, or you were just looking blindly at the...
Dang it.
I know, it happens. You know, one of the things we want to consider is what's happened with inflation over the last few years. Policy comes into play, different administration, different policies. What are your thoughts on this administration? Now, we had 4 years from 2016 to 2020. They had their set of policies that they moved through. Trump did. The Biden administration had different policies, different standpoints. What are your thoughts on how these next 4 years will come into play, specifically regarding, you know, the real estate component? What do you see transpiring, good and bad?
Wow.
Did you do your homework?
You didn't have, you gave me that question. I would say, I think economic policies are a big factor in people's ability to buy a home. I think interest rates, just go by inflation. I think some of the things that I've been hearing about this new administration, inflation could be lowered by a number of things. Coming out of the pandemic, we had some transportation issues and some strikes that really backlogged our supply chain. And I think the new transportation secretary that has been appointed or announced or whatever they call it now. Not in office yet.
Yeah, not in the office yet.
But he's got some good ideas for that. I think that could be a big thing. One of the things that really hurt was some of the oil and gas policies. I think the transportation of liquid natural gas across the Pacific, that was a huge hit to global energy pricing. So I think some of the economic policies will change that in the short term.
And slow down inflation.
And that allows buyers more buying power. I think the interest rates should come down a bit. I think that's confidence in our ability to pay our bills around the world. So, you know, real estate or mortgage rates are tied to treasury bonds. I think if the treasury bonds are doing better, then mortgage rates can come down a little bit. So that'd be...
Yeah, there's all kinds.
That'd be good.
You almost need a PhD to understand the back end.
I'm going back to my Econ 101.
Yeah, there's an inverse relationship between bonds and mortgage rates, and you know, from the Fed's standpoint, and how they loan money to the banks. You know, and that was one of the questions. I mean, Trump came out and no, not Trump. Actually, the chairman of the Fed. They asked him. They said, if Trump asks you to, you know, step down, will you? And he said, no. I'm not going to step down. And it's independent. I mean, it should be an independent, organization from the mainstay of the government, but it is kind of encompassed there.
And just an example of how they're not linked is the Fed just dropped interest rates 2 weeks ago. I don't know when this comes out, but just recently, and immediately mortgage rates went up.
Yeah,
they did.
Yeah.
So they are not connected. And I talk to people all the time, and they're like, well, the Fed just cut the rates, and you have to give them this kind of dumbed down spiel, but it's like they're not connected at all.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the inverse relationships. There's all kinds of things that happen on the back end. And just because the Fed lowers the interest rates doesn't mean it parlays into a lower interest rate on your mortgage. Now, at some point it will, but they look at jobs, earnings, unemployment, things like that. And then they announce, because, if you have a really good running economy, then that's the time that they typically have a little bit higher interest rates because people can afford it. Now, if things go to hell in a handbasket, then you also have the ability to lower the interest rates, which frees up the economy a little bit. So those things come into play. Shannon, what are your thoughts on these next 4 years, and what do you anticipate in the real estate arena with the new administration and their standpoint?
So some of the things that I'm kind of excited to see how they're going to impact is I'm hoping we'll see more investors moving around. I know there was a lot of talk the last couple of years about, raising capital gains and things like that. And that gets investors really nervous. So I think now investors might be a little more confident, which might be good for us. One thing I'm really interested in seeing how it works, oil and gas, definitely, because I think that locally is going to help here. If we can open up a little bit of oil and gas, our market's going to move again, because we're going to have people moving back in. We're going to have people buying instead of renting, which will take some pressure off the rental market too, because that's really difficult right now. But one thing I'm really looking at that I'm excited to see is when he talks about no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, that is where people really see their money freed up. That's where people, I think, are really going to see extra money in their pocket. And when people have extra money in their pocket, they spend. And it may not be in real estate. I hope it is. It could be just around town, but it doesn't matter. Even if it's at local restaurants, even if it's at our mall, even if it's at the auto dealerships, it helps all of us here. Because if those people are making money, those people are going to be buying houses. Those people are going to be moving more. They're going to be investing. They're going to be, maybe buying an investment for their retirement, things of that nature. So I'm really excited to see how that's going to impact things. I think when people have more money in their pocket, when we get inflation under control, it already has been coming down a bit, in all fairness. But I really think it's going to get in check with this administration. I think that if inflation really gets in check and people have a little bit more money in their pocket, maybe through some tax cuts and maybe through things like, no tax on a couple of the items they're doing, or maybe they can sell some properties without, with a little bit of relief on their capital gains. All of that is good for moving the market. All of that brings more people into the market, which right now there's a lot of people that cannot buy in this market.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things that has been so hard for especially first-time homebuyers is the inflation and the cost of everything going through the roof. They're trying to buy just and maintain just groceries and normal bills. Then you throw in the ability to buy a house, and the prices of houses have gone through the roof. Now all of a sudden wages haven't caught up with inflation, and that makes it a really difficult thing for a first-time homebuyer. And Aspen just talked a lot about the inability for first-time homebuyers to purchase, but you were going to say something else.
I was going to say, if you're buying your second house, it's typically you've already got some equity in your first house. You've got something to work with. So those resales haven't been as hard, but there's the first time home buyers that have really been hit hard that they just don't have the ability. I mean, they are going to, there's down payment assistance and things of that nature that they can get. But not everybody qualifies for that. Not everybody gets that. So there's a lot of people that are kind of stuck in that hard place where they don't have that extra money on hand. They don't have, they can't make the high mortgage payments, but they're pretty high right now, just a lot of those factors in play. I think it's going to be exciting to see that open up and see people with more money in their pocket and be able to go back to taking charge of their finances.
Now, one of the big things is with inflation, one of the biggest drivers is your cost of natural resources. And if you can get those under control and get those down, and I think this administration is very friendly pro oil and gas, obviously, that's one of the biggest things. When you're energy independent, inflation typically slows down. And then you have supply chain issues and things like that. So I think that's one of their big agendas is to kind of tamper the inflation, stop the inflation as much as they can. That will help with the affordability. But also, in the first 4 years in the Trump administration, they did a lot of bonus depreciation. So as investors, real estate investors, bonus depreciation was the big thing. Aspen, talk to me about what your thought is for the next 4 years, and maybe if bonus depreciation, because it was trailing off, now it's been incrementally phasing out. If that comes back into play, how do you think that's going to help?
So I think that the next 4 years is going to be really, really good for investors and second, third, fourth home-time buyers. I actually think it's going to be just as bad or worse for first-time home buyers because the rates are still high. They're going to stay high. Even if they absorb the Federal Reserve, which I don't really know how that would look, I still think rates are going to be high. I think inflation's still at 2.6%. Employment is actually still higher than it should be really for the healthy middle class is really, I think, what drives your economy because people that are in the top 1% aren't spending as a traditional, middle class family would. So I think with the tariff, I think that's going to make things more expensive in the near future. Who knows? In the long term, I see what the point is. You get the tariffs in, you drive more business into America, more jobs in America. I get it. But in the short term, I think we are going to see a hike in consumer goods, including groceries and, things you need for your everyday life. So I think it's going to be just as difficult or more difficult for the first-time homebuyer. With that said, though, I do think rates will drop now that we're out of the election, probably in the, maybe March, early, springtime is whenever I'm thinking rates will probably drop. I think we all can agree 3% and 2% rates are not good.
Yeah.
They're not good for the economy. We need them to, but if they could get to 4 or 5% pre-COVID, I think that's what people would really like to see. You would just be able to take a little bit of breath, people could breathe a little bit. But I do think it's hard now, and I don't think we can expect an overnight change or even a few years. It's going to take a while to get back. We still don't have the inventory we need. I still think this is a really good time for investors to buy. I mean, refinance later, especially if we think the rates are going to drop or dump the election now. I mean, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm still writing offers on things. I'm still looking for good deals. But for me and my clients, I think it's going to be great. Yeah. But first-time home buyer, I still think they're going to be in the same predicament that we've been in.
And maybe some of those loan programs will evolve for first-time home buyers. There'll be some programs that open up where they really make a push to allow for maybe some extra tax advantages or something for first-time home buyers.
One thing with the Trump administration, I know that they really are, about deregulation. And so I think maybe with lending, now this is where I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I do think they're going to try and get rid of some of the regulation on lending. And that could be good. That could be bad. I mean, we saw the bad parts of that in 2008 when people were getting loans that they could not afford.
The Fogger loans?
Right.
Yes, just for our viewers, a Fogger loan is for anybody that can, if you can fog a mirror or you can breathe, then you can get a loan. And that was 2008. And that caused that crash.
We didn't even worry about pre-qualification. We would just, if you find a house, then we'll go worry about the loan because everybody could get a loan.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. These days, we don't do that. Yeah. We're not even going to shop unless we know what you can do.
We called it a no doc, no down loan. So like literally you didn't have to document your income. You could just say, I make $300,000 a year. And they're like, okay. And they would just, write it down on the paper. And then you would get an 80-20 loan, which means you're financing 100%, 80% to the first lender, 20% to the second lender based on a no doc loan. So you don't have to prove income. I mean, that was great. That was the Wild West.
That was amazing for investors. That was amazing for, us or people who wanted to get out and get a property fairly quickly and easily with little, with little into it. And
risky though.
Yeah. But there are a lot of people that took those loans too. They were first-time home buyers. It was open to them. They didn't really know how to navigate that. You don't refinance later. That interest rate moves. There's all these components to it that you've got to be savvy to get a loan like that.
I mean, even we see people now, because what can you get, like 44% of your income can go towards housing or something? I don't know, whatever the lending is. But I would never spend that much of my income on housing. But we see people do it all day, every single day. So I do think that some regulation in lending protects, it's frustrating and there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but I do think it protects some people who don't know how the industry works. It's frustrating for us that just want to get a good investment loan and we know the numbers work. And I can see that why that would be nice to have a little bit of deregulation, but I don't necessarily know about taking away too much on the first-time homebuyer side.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're very susceptible. I mean, that's why you have the Truth in Lending Act and TILA RESPA. The Dodd-Frank Act came out after 2008. In fact, New Mexico was pretty instrumental in keeping owner finance out of that, because they had included in that act that if you were a seller and you were going to sell on owner finance, you had to qualify that buyer like a normal mortgage. So it put an incredible onus on the seller, and New Mexico stepped up and fought against that on national.
They're trying to do that again, so we're fighting it still.
Yeah. So it's always on the table.
But that is the real benefit of owner finance. Is that people that maybe on paper don't look good, but can buy. If you've got a seller that wants to take a chance on you, then you've got an option for you.
Yeah. And the interest rates are negotiable. So, seller charges a little bit higher interest rate because they're taking a little bit more of a risk. I mean, there's things that can be done. I agree with you, though. We do need some regulation. And that's why, we were having stuff in 2008, and before, where people would put something under contract and the lender would tell them a certain rate and whatnot. And they would drive across the country with their U-Haul and show up, and we'd be a title company. And they go, wait a minute, my interest rate's at 1% higher than what they told me. And now I've got a U-Haul truck out in the parking lot. I've got to get this home closed. It's going to cost me more not to close it. And so they would move forward and close. Well, the new regulations have cleaned that up. So people can't just, lenders can't just say, oh, whoopsie, you're a little bit higher on the interest rate at closing.
Promise you anything to get you in. And then when they know that you have no other option, you're going to take their loan. They can't do that.
It's starting to sound like these guys are the reason we have the new rules.
Hey,
we did all.
Yeah, we ran amok back in the day.
That's Ben's suitcase full of cash story.
That's right.
Right.
And signing for his clients.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, we won't go there. All right. But, I digress. Moving back forward to this.
Yeah, get off of that.
Let's get off of that one. If I ever run for politics, they're going to dig up my past. So that's what, no, we ain't doing that.
Call me if anyone needs info.
But back to this moving forward, part of the things too that I've been reading about the new administration is that they're saying they want to open up more federal lands for new construction. If you look just in San Juan County, we are 94% public lands, only 6% privately held in San Juan County. So we are in like a little island in the middle of all this land, but we have an affordability and a housing lack of surplus. We're in a crisis almost. I hate to use the word crisis, so I was trying to find a better word, but
right.
We really have.
I think there's a housing crisis right now.
We have a huge need, and if we were if extra land was available and there wasn't so many hoops to jump through to get that to develop it, I think more people would be building houses to meet the demand. So what are your thoughts in that regard? As far as releasing some of the regulations on accessing the private land, or public land, I should say, for private development. What do you think there? Because in Phoenix area, you just have thousands and thousands of acres that are not public lands, that are privately held, that people just continue to absorb into the municipalities and build. That's why they can build at the rate that they're building, and they do have the demand to meet it. But here locally, it's not the case. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, even if the land was available, developers are not developing at the rate that they should be. So, and I know New Mexico, I was on a few meetings this year, the MFA, and I think it's called the Housing Authority now, came into a bunch of money, and they're going to start, working with developers to try to develop more multifamily houses, more higher density things, with the hopes that it's affordable housing. The problem that we're seeing is whether it's affordable or not affordable, whether you can charge a premium on the rents or not, cost to build is the same. So we're looking at, we're trying to put in some either some tax credits or some, advantages for developers so that they can, start getting a return, because, nobody's going to work at a loss.
Yeah.
And if you can't really make anything, there's no point in doing the work for no return. So we're trying to work closely with the legislation with the legislators to come up with some solutions there.
Yeah, and I really think that's where the bonus depreciation comes into play, and some of these incentives that are offered for people that invest in their business. They invest into expanding their business or building new construction. You can depreciate that out as an owner and take the immediate tax advantage in that year, which is significant. It's a significant check if you can get that box checked.
And sometimes that's all that a business needs just to thrive, just to grow, is just a little bit of a break. And when those businesses thrive and they grow, they offer more to their community. They offer more jobs. They offer more services. It's nice to see somebody saying, we want you to invest in yourself. We want you to be successful. We want, because a lot of times government is just standing there with their hand out wanting to just take a larger portion than what you're getting out of your business. Yeah. And so I think that when they're recognizing that, businesses need to be strong and healthy for the communities to be able to enjoy the services that they offer and benefit from those companies, everybody does better.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not just the guy that owns the company.
Yeah, and we see that play out here locally. Actually, we have a local company that, I should say there's a company here locally that's based out of Texas area. And people always say, well, if, people make money, are they really going to give back to their communities? Yes, we see it time and time again. Hillcorp is a company that they give $30,000 to each employee to give to a nonprofit of their choice.
They do.
I mean, that is incredible. That's one of those things that really helps local communities.
Yeah.
And makes an impact. But not only locally, they said you can give it to any nonprofit you want, even across the country, as long as it's a nonprofit. And so those employees went out and gave $30,000. I mean, talk about the impact of that. And that's what happens when you have companies doing really well and believing in the community support. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. What do you think about Doge? Any thoughts on that? The Department of Government Efficiency?
Okay, so I'm interested to see how this plays out. I'm not going to say good or bad. I don't know. I mean, but I'm willing to give this a shot because for the first time, we actually have people that are successful outside of our government saying, you got a problem here, because clearly we have a problem here. Mm-hmm. We have a spending problem. And they give those lists every year. They give the lists and they say, here's the top 100, pork, that should make you angry. And it always makes me angry. Always makes me angry that our tax dollars, that we're being told, you're not paying enough, you're not doing your fair share. We hear all these words all the time, but we look at it and say, this is what I'm not doing enough of this. You're really telling me I'm not doing enough of this. So for the first time to actually have people outside the government successful to look at it and say, this is waste. We're not going to do this. We could do this better. I'm willing to give it a try because something has to change. Our government is a big, bloated pig.
Mess.
It really is.
Yeah.
And at some point, somebody has to put that down. No, the people that are running for office don't want to do it because they have to get reelected. They're always going to give you what you want. And that's why we're in the position we're in. So I'm open-minded. I'm open-minded to see if this could work. I'm ready for some brilliant minds to look at it.
And like you had said before, Aspen, I don't mind paying taxes. No. I think we should pay taxes,
Absolutely.
Right? We got to help further our first responders, roads, infrastructure, things like that. It's just a hard pill to swallow when, they come out with that top 100 list and, they spent, $20,000 in Brazil at some nightclub. And you're like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's just a tiny example, but I mean, the
millions of dollars just on pet projects that don't impact the public at all. Yeah. And you think, okay, what's a drop in the bucket? It's a couple bucks for each person. That money adds up. And when you consider that there's maybe half of the people in America that actually are paying the taxes, that's a big burden for those people. There should be some accountability for that money. So I'm actually excited to see.
How many audits have failed? Like the last 7 or something? Like, could you imagine if a business
could never run the way our government does ever?
Their audit and was like, oh, well. Okay.
If we failed, we'll get them next time, right? Oh my gosh.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, exactly.
The $20,000 toilet seat and the $80,000 hammer.
Right.
Yeah. And then the Department of Defense missing all this money. I mean, I have real heartburn when we have sent hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign wars I mean, there's arguments on both sides, but I have real heartburn with that when we have natural disasters in America and FEMA says, we're out of money.
Yeah.
You need $12 billion.
But FEMA can only give a certain amount of money. And I think they gave that max amount. I can't remember what it is, but they can only give a certain amount and they have to be asked to come in. So I saw a lot of thing with the hurricane relief and people were getting so upset. Like, why isn't FEMA there? Because they can't just go. That's not how it works.
Right.
And they can only give X amount of money. So
Yeah, and there's that $700. We're only getting $700. That was actually
the max that they can.
And that was actually that was actually an initial thing that they gave to everybody that was in the area. And then they're coming in later. So
But FEMA does have to be asked to come.
they got some bad press.
Yeah, and they did get, in all fairness, they did, but each state has the ability to ask for FEMA.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, the states should have the power. Our government wasn't founded for the federal level to have all the power. The states should have the power. But there should be a position where they are able to tap, hey, we've had 3 natural disasters, not our typical one. We need more money, and go to the government and say, we need more money for Americans. And they should be able to say, yeah, let's take care of this. We've had bigger natural disasters, instead of saying, well, we're out of money, and we have nothing to go get it from. They should have a surplus there, or at least funds available. So I think that DOGE is going to be a pretty interesting concept.
I'm excited to see.
Yeah.
I'm open-minded.
Yeah. And I think we're getting support from both sides of the aisles on the, government efficiency. You're starting to see that in the news. People are behind now.
I think everybody, no matter who you are, wants accountability from our government. I think everybody can agree. Now, we may agree on what that looks like or how it happens, but we can all agree this government of ours needs some serious accountability. And it's time that somebody step in and start talking directly to the American people and telling us where we can clean things up, instead of waiting for them to do it. They won't do it.
Okay. Well, we are going to have to wrap up the conversation. Gosh, that went way too quick. Just real quick, what do you think the biggest impact will be from the election in the real estate space? Paul Berry, jump on that one.
Consumers' ability to buy. Hopefully inflation goes down, people can buy more.
Okay. Great answer. Aspen?
I think if there is some deregulation in lending, investors are going to be a lot more apt to buy. I think they're kind of holding off right now and
seeing what happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Shannon?
I'm thinking inflation. I think if they can get the inflation a little more in check and do a couple of things, that we're going to see everybody with a little more money in their pocket.
I would agree. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is to tackle inflation right up front, make sure the supply chains work. That'll tamp down inflation, and then deregulate some of the stuff that we don't need. I mean, regulations are good to protect consumers, but I think a little bit of deregulation, you have too much red tape. It's just become such a barrier for people, for businesses to grow. And we don't want that. We want an environment where businesses succeed and thrive because they're good for the communities. It's the American way. We want that for everyone in America, not right or left. We want all Americans to be successful, because we have great Americans on both sides of the aisle. So this wasn't meant to be a political podcast, other than let's talk about some of the things that would help our community and our country moving forward. And so hopefully this sheds some light on our thoughts here at the Lyons Group. If you like our content, please like and subscribe. Our YouTube channel is fantastic. Go to our Facebook page. We have Instagram, TikTok. We have a fantastic newsletter. And of course, you can go to sjcbroker.com at any point and schedule a consultation with any one of us here at the Lyons Group. We'd love to sit down with you, whether you're buying or selling commercial or residential properties. We can give you an advantage in today's market. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time in the Den.
Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in the Den.